All right, let's do a Bible study on faithful stewardship of spiritual gifts and how it's critical the person who has the spiritual gifting is humble, keeps their pride in check. And you should anticipate that God will prune you. Pruning like pruning a rose bush. If you're not sure what I mean by that, do a quick Google search. What does it mean to prune a rose bush? You cut it back, you kind of reset it. Anyway, today we're talking about how God entrusts us with spiritual gifts like insights, revelations, and when we use these things that He's given us, when we use them in ways that He wants us to use them, He will give us more. If we neglect these things, if we don't use them, then you should expect that you will lose these things. So not only will you not be given more, what you thought you had will be taken from you. We'll see how God will protect us from pride, because pride is the root to all evil. It's one of the number one, if it's not one of, it's the number one thing you need to be concerned about when it comes to preventing you from receiving spiritual gifting, as well as losing spiritual gifting. So you could start off, and this has happened, I've witnessed this myself, where my heart was in a great place, a very selfless place. My eyes were on God, not myself. My eyes and my desires were for His glory, not my own glory. And I could see the Holy Spirit really pouring gifting on me that really the majority of my gifting has always come in the form of speaking, of being able to speak to somebody, oftentimes, most of the time, fellow Christians, and help them better understand what God is trying to say to them, whether it's through biblical text, or maybe it's always going to be biblically consistent. And when these things would happen, I would in turn get recognition, get admiration, like, wow, John, you must be anointed. Like, it's amazing the way you understand the Bible the way you do, the way you can explain the Bible the way you do. And then that kind of recognition from people will puff up my pride. I've been through these cycles. In Proverbs it says, humility comes before honor, pride comes before fall. I have had some awesome examples of this in my life where my spirit is so in the right place. I'm in such a humble state. And there's just this blessing coming over me, whether it's financially, making friends, saying the right thing in the right moment. And then as a result, I start becoming proud of myself. And then not long after, all the blessing I received as a result of my humility causes me to become proud. And then that pride causes me to lose it all. Anyway, main theme, scripture, Luke 8:18. Take care how you hear, for whoever has, talking about spiritual gifts, to him more will be given. Whoever does not have, even what he thinks he has, he won't just lose it, it'll be taken away. God will take it from you. It's not like you just accidentally lost it. No, there's a force out there that's going to take it from you. Let's read this line towards right at the top there. Spiritual insight grows with obedience. It shrinks when ignored. All right, Matthew 25:14 through 30. That's a long one. Let's go ahead and jump over to that text. I'm not going to read it verbatim just because it's too long, but I'm very familiar with it, so I can summarize it pretty quickly, I think. All right, 25, where's 14? 14, 15. I guess I don't need to underline all of that, but I would encourage you to read through this text on your own, at your own pace. But I'll give you a quick summary of it. The parable of the talents. So think of, I don't really know what a talent is. I guess we could just quickly Google and see, but it's not that important. Think of it as like a gold bar, gold, like silver and gold. So that's sufficient to get the bigger idea. So a talent, and maybe it was a gold bar of some sort. Probably was, actually. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. So a man, aka a master of some sorts, and we can infer that he's a master because he has servants. And he's going to leave. He's going to go on a journey, and while he's gone, he's going to entrust his property, all such things, to his servants to look after. And in addition to that, there's 3 specific servants that he's going to entrust with some gold talents. The first servant, which the master sees the most capable of the 3, he entrusts 5 gold talents to the first servant. The second servant, who he sees not as capable as the first, but more capable than the third, he entrusts 2 gold talents. And the third he entrusts with 1. He sees the third servant as likely the least capable to, perform in such a way that would generate a profit. So he's like, all right, I'll give you a gold talent. Well, let's see what you do with it. But I'm definitely not giving you I'm not giving you more than the bare minimum, because you have yet to develop trust in me to entrust you with more. So the master leaves for a long time, and while he's gone, the first servant, who was entrusted with the 5 talents, he doubles it. Whatever he did, bought Bitcoin at the right time, sold at the right time, whatever, he doubled the resource that he was entrusted with. The second servant, who received 2 talents, did the same thing. He doubled that. And then the third, I don't know if the second one actually doubled or not, but he generated a profit. I think he doubled it, but not really that important. The third one, this is where this parable becomes a bit more important. The third one, in fear of losing the money, losing the gold, he decided just to play it safe and dig a hole and bury it. So the master comes back. He sees the first servant doubled it. He's very pleased with that. He sees the second servant. He generated a profit with the 2 talents he had. And then he comes to the third servant, who did nothing with it. And this, kind of proving the suspicion the master, kind of validating why he was only given 1 talent in the first place. The master's upset, and he says to him, you could have invested this with bankers to, at a minimum, have earned some interest. Like a certificate of deposit. I don't know if they formally had certificates of deposit at that time, but the way a certificate of deposit works, let's just say you give a bank $10,000 for a term of 6 months at a 5% yield. In 6 months, the bank, this is close to guarantee. Like, I guess if the bank goes belly up, they go bankrupt or something, then maybe you don't get the money back. But as long as you're working with a notable bank like a Chase or a Bank of America, it's a pretty slim chance you're going to have any issue with getting your money back plus the interest they owe you. So you give them, say, $10,000 for 6 months. The yield's 5%. at the end of the 6 months, you get your $10,000 back plus your 5% interest, which I believe is $500 on 10,000. And so the master is saying to the third servant, at a bare minimum, you could have done that, but you did nothing. And so let's go to the bottom here. I think it's, verse 30. I'll read the last two. For to everyone who has will be given more, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I think it's fair to say that God takes what he's trying to convey here, and it's red letters. So whenever you see red letters in a Bible, whether it's an electronic version like I'm using here or actual hard copy, not all Bibles have the red letter text. Some of it's just black and white throughout. But whenever you do see red letters, that's referencing things that were spoken directly by Jesus. And so this is Jesus talking, and we can see that it's important to him that he have the ability to give you spiritual gifts, and then you use those spiritual gifts. Otherwise, it's worthless. It was him investing spiritual gifts to you. If you do nothing with them, is worthless. What you will be worthy of is being casted into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He's describing hell. And this causes me to be like, whoa. You're saying to me that as a Christian, if I just sort of sit on the spiritual gifts you give me and I do nothing with them, that's going to earn me hell? That is what the text here in of itself is suggesting. So I'll acknowledge that. I think that we could spend some time picking that apart and be like, okay, maybe it doesn't mean exactly that at face value. Maybe it does. But anyway, suffice to say that it is very important to God that that you be qualified to receive spiritual gifting from him, and that you do something with it. You don't just sit on it. I think we can all agree with that. Next one, Proverbs 9:9. Give instruction to wise man, and he will be wiser. We won't get into that one. Now, as you can tell, I'm on ChatGPT here. I use ChatGPT like crazy. So we may or may not use everything it suggested that I touch on in this study. But I'll just go about this at my own discretion. All right, the next one, John 15:2. That's definitely worth jumping to, so let's take a look at that. By the way, this version of the Bible I'm using on my phone, it's made by U version. That's YOU version. Kind of a weird name, if you ask me, but whatever. That's what it's called. I think it's great. Lots of features with this one. Let's see, that was 15:2. If you notice at the top there, top left where it says John 15, well, just to the right, we're currently on the ESV, English Standard Version. Personally, I like to bounce between New King James Version, the New International Version, and the English Standard Version, and then sometimes the New American Standard Bible. John MacArthur, he's one of my favorites, and his favorite version was the New American Standard Bible, but they're all good. We'll save talking about is one better than the other for another time, but the point why I even mention that is if I'm struggling with understanding what something says, I'll bounce between these different versions to help gain better understanding. All right, so we're looking for 15:2. So chapter 15, we're there. All right, every branch, and this is Jesus talking, we got some red letters here. What just happened? Oop, I'm offline right now, so that's okay. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. He's referring to the Father. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes. God takes an interest in that works with that person, the branch being, the person, the Christian, God's going to take an interest in you, and God's going to work on you. God's going to cut crap out of your life that you don't need. If you're a faithful user of spiritual gifting, if there's any junk in your life, stuff, money, relationships that are hindering your ability to perform and carry out your spiritual gifting, you should expect God to cut that stuff out. And there could be some pain with that. So that you may bear even more fruit, that you become more qualified to receive more spiritual gifting. Teaching point, we pretty much already hit on this. God expects that our spiritual gifting, that we increase. If you use your gifting, it will multiply. If you don't use it, you will lose what little you had. So yeah, ask yourself, what gifts or insights has God already entrusted to you? And then, have you been using them? If not, how can you be using them? Ask God for opportunity to use them. Moving on. I think we can kind of skip this section, but if you want to take note, if you want to dive in deeper, what happens if you don't use these things? There's some pretty tough language in the Bible that what happens to the person that is just inactive. Language like, a tree that bears no fruit is good for nothing. It'll be cut down and cast into the furnace. Pretty rough stuff, right? So anyway, we will touch on the key idea here. Neglecting or dishonoring God's gifts. It's a great way to invite losing something. And it could be that you get debilitated in some way, shape, or form. Like I have prayed to God. Like, backing up a little bit here, in my late teens, I saw hell. And I know that might be hard to believe, but you would be wise to just trust me when I tell you that God revealed hell to me. This was at a time where I didn't believe in any of it. I thought that people that believed in God in the Bible were just weak-minded and they needed God as a crutch. And maybe there are some people out there. Maybe there are people out there who only believe in God because they're just weak, feeble-minded people and need a crutch to get on day to day. That has nothing to do with whether God is real or not. But me, in all my pride and all my arrogance, really my desire to not live a life, I don't want God. I wanted to be my own God. If I want to act out sexually, immorally, if I want to participate in drugs, ultimately my motivations, and I didn't know this at this time because I was deceived by my own heart, which is just, I don't know if I said this already in the opening, but your heart, your own personal heart, is deceitful among all things. It is desperately wicked. Who can know it? And so here I am just leading myself to believe that the only reason why God, the whole idea of God even exists is because weak-minded people need that to get through life. And and maybe there are examples of that. And that was sufficient enough for me to be like, yes, I'm going to cling to that as the reason why I don't believe. I'm not a weak-minded person. I'm a strong-minded person, so I don't need God. And therefore, I can do anything I want and not feel guilty about it. That right there is the majority, is probably the primary motivator of people that don't believe in God. They'll cling to, bad things happen to me, therefore if God's real, it's his fault, I want nothing to do with him. But really, if God really was real, I can't believe bad things happening. The motivation at the end of the day, why people are willing to accept these, they claim these things as their motives. The real motive is, you're a sinner, you don't want to face your sin for whatever reason, and the whole idea of God in the Bible trips you up when it comes to your ability to sin freely. It took an act of God to reveal that to me. I did not have the ability on my own to be as brutally honest with myself as I needed to be to realize that truth. It took the work of the Holy Spirit. It took showing me hell. Hell really is real. Heaven really is real. I didn't see heaven. I will say that I didn't see Jesus per se. I saw a light in the form of a cross, and there was no question it was Jesus's presence. It sort of, pulled me out of this hellish vision I was going through. It was no fun. I tell you the truth. It is horrible. And it took time for the Holy Spirit to reveal to me what was really going on in my heart and my mind, the real reasons why I was rejecting God, the real reasons why I was rejecting Jesus, because everything I told myself was BS. I told myself what I wanted to hear. I told myself what I wanted to believe, as opposed to acknowledging I'm not God. I didn't create anything. I have the power to create nothing. It'd probably be smart of me to look to the one who does create and take my cues from him on what is or isn't real, etc., etc. Anyway, well, the thing that prompted all of that, so learning that hell really is real and learning that our own hearts are so deceiving, I have prayed and I still pray, Lord, you do whatever you have to do to me to make sure I don't go to hell. If I got to go through a car accident that cripples my legs, cripples me from the neck down, so be it, Lord. And there's language in the Bible that talks about how if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It's better to go into the kingdom of heaven partially than to be full and go to hell. I don't just think, I know that God does these kinds of things. Now, he's not telling us specifically to do this to yourself, but what it is telling me is God has no problem with inflicting great pain upon you if it's going to make a difference. Now, if, taking out your legs or something isn't even going to do it, he may just leave, like what you don't want, it's what you think you want this, but what you don't want is God to just completely leave you alone. You really don't want to be successful in his absence. What do I need God for? I succeed at everything. I have the perfect body. I have perfect health. I have perfect finances. There's really nothing in my life I need to apologize for. What do I need God for? You really don't want, that's a great way, it's a great recipe, great formula to go into hell. And go ahead, blame God for that if you want. But one of the things that I've learned, hell is real, heaven is real, this life is but a blip. And if it takes God allowing or even causing calamity in my life to be the difference maker, then I'll praise him for taking that interest in me, for being interested enough in me that he'll do or he'll allow to have done to me whatever it takes to keep me focused on him. All right. Pride, the greatest threat. Pride is the root to all evil. This verse here, 2 Corinthians 12, or this passage, 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10, this is important. Let's get to that. 2 Corinthians 12, 7, right here. The thorn in the flesh, more specifically the thorn in Paul's flesh, lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, of the abundance of things God has been doing to me and through me. Paul is, I mean, just take a step back and look at Paul. We think of him as a great man, you know? And the point that Paul is making here is God saw it necessary to not just leave it, but to insist that he have a hindrance in his life that kept him humble, that prevented him from exalting himself, prevented him from being conceited. So let's just read the text plainly here. I almost feel like we got to go up a little bit. All right, this is definitely an area where I highly encourage you to spend some time on your own in the Word. We'll just start on verse 7 here. Lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. All right, I'm not really sure what that means. Let's get out of the New King James Version and jump over to, we'll go NIV. Where'd verse 7 go? Doesn't have the paragraphs broken up the way the other version did, but that's okay. So there's 6. All right, here's 7. Because of these surpassingly great revelations, therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take this thorn, whatever this hindrance is, away from me. But God responded, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul is still a sinner. The more spiritual gifting God equips you with, the more vulnerable a person is going to be to pride, being proud of themselves. And so God saw it fitting that some version of demonic torment that Paul had to deal with, God was okay with it. God didn't just allow it, but if anything, God insisted that be in place because it kept Paul from being confused. It kept him reminded on who was really in control. Paul was just a player on the chessboard. God's the chess master. And if you're a chess player, you don't need your chess pieces getting a mind of their own and doing what they think is cool or becoming proud of themselves. You want them to be fully subservient to you, the chess player. Now, we don't really have a problem with that when we play the game of chess because these are inanimate objects, but it's the same idea. And so to sort of help Paul maintain his proper positioning towards who he really is and who God really is, who's really responsible for here, that the glory that would come his way by being this kind of vessel for God's purposes, that glory would not derail him from keeping his pride in check and staying humble. This is a good one. 1 Timothy 3:6. I can relate to so much of this. 1 Timothy 3:6. There's 5, here's 6. All right, so what's being described here? Qualifications for overseers and deacons. So positions of authority in a church. And this goes through explaining what type of character such a person should be. And let's go ahead and read through this. It's a pretty easy read. Here is a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer, you desire a noble task. Now, the overseer needs to be above reproach. It's important that you're not messing around with questionable things like alcohol or marijuana, where, yes, if you're saved and you slip in these areas or you struggle in these areas, God's grace, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, he died for these things. And so, but if you want to be in a prominent position, a position of authority in a church, it's important that you not be struggling with these things. That you be above reproach, that you be faithful to your spouse, that you be temperate, self-controlled, respectable, deserving of respect. You're hospitable, able to teach. You have the ability of being a teacher. Not given to drunkenness. You're not violent, but you're gentle. You're not quarrelsome. I got a problem with that. I like fighting. I don't mind quarrels. That's something that God is working with me on. Not a lover of money. You must manage. He must manage his family well. Has proven to have obedient children. And do all this in a manner that is worthy of respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? That's a good question. He must not. Now, here's the key. Here's the kicker. A big reason why we're referencing this passage. He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited. He may become proud of himself and fall under the same judgment as the devil. The devil, prior to his fall, had pretty high standing in the kingdom of heaven. And he became proud. It was pride. Like, why can't I be like God? How come he gets to be in charge? What makes him so right? All this kind. If you're anything like me, a sinner on this earth who has pride in their heart, pretty easy to relate to these kinds of things. And so I remember myself. My conversion was pretty cool. I have a really cool testimony. And it was enough for me to really scare me straight and become very fervent for the Lord. But I was young, immature, not battle tested, not seasoned. And so it didn't take long for God to be doing cool stuff through me, other people having positive reactions that caused me to become proud of myself. And a lot of that stuff God had to strip away. So I really direct this at myself. I simulate in my head, sorry, John, it's good that you want to be a deacon, and it looks like you have all the right stuff, but you just became a Christian. Maybe, walk with God for a few years, 5 years or so, because I can tell you, there's a good chance you're going to struggle with some things. And so not only do we run the risk of you becoming, person in authority and having compromising behavioral conduct or whatever, you run the risk of becoming proud of yourself. Like, it's important that you mature in your faith, that there be time and opportunity to go by, that God has shown you how susceptible you are to pride. Because if you're in this position of authority, it's easy to become proud of yourself, and then that just becomes a problem, right? So I think that covers that topic well. Proverbs 16:18, I think I touched on that. Pride goes before humility before honor, pride before a fall. James 4:6, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. God sometimes allows hardship to keep us humble and usable. I would say God oftentimes, this again, ChatGPT we're working with here, which I love ChatGPT for the time being. I'm concerned that these AI programs are just going to become compromised as time goes on, but whatever. For the time being, it's a good tool. God opposes the proud. God oftentimes allows hardship to keep us humble and usable. In fact, if you're not experiencing hardship, you might ask yourself if God is really involved in your life. If everything's just working out for you, I'm not saying that that's direct evidence, but it could be evidence that God hasn't taken an interest in your life, not the way that you would probably want him to. Moving on. Yeah, so it kind of ties right into this next section, section 6. Expect pruning if you're faithful. Expect to go through some challenging stuff. Expect there to be events in your life that further kill your pride. Expect a noticeable process underway when it comes to giving you spiritual gifts, making you qualified to use those gifts, and if you're faithful in using these gifts, expect more pruning-like things, oftentimes difficult things, to further qualify you. You want to be a Navy SEAL? Hey, you've been a great cadet, or whatever's below a Navy SEAL in the Army or the Navy or what have you. That's great. Oh, you want to advance? You want to become Navy SEAL material? Well, guess what? You get to go through a whole heap of tough stuff to get to that next level. It's a lot like that. Radical commitment. I think I already touched on this, but it's Matthew 5:29 through 30 where it talks about if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your arm causes you to sin, cut it off. Sounds extreme. Well, hell is extreme. Heaven is extreme. What we're talking about here is extreme. And although I don't think God is expecting anyone, really doesn't want anyone to, self-mutilate themselves, I do believe God is absolutely, I know for a fact that God is absolutely willing and certainly able to put you through extreme discomfort if it means making the difference on where you're going to spend your eternity. All right, moving on. Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Now, typical sinners are going to read that and be like, ooh, that's how I can get whatever I want. I just have to somehow delight in God. Maybe that just means listen to 3 worship songs a day, and then he'll give me my desires. It's not what he's saying. You're going to desire different things outside of God's influence, outside of converting to being a Christ-like person, aka Christian. You probably desire a lot of selfish things. Self-comfort, self-recognition, self. Now, you might have trained yourself to speak in a way that sounds selfless as a method to gaining more for yourself. I watch this people, shouldn't say I, shouldn't brag about yourself. Why? Well, you'll get more. Oh, okay. So it's still, don't brag because your motivation for not bragging is still a selfish motivation. Yeah, you'll get promoted more. The world's funny like that, man. Anyway, if I didn't say it already, It's funny watching people who are proud of themselves for being humble. I got my hand raised. I've done that. I still struggle with that. Your heart is deceitful among all things. Your heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? So people be like, in my heart of hearts, I know that I'm supposed to be a man instead of a woman. In my heart of hearts, I know I'm a man and I'm supposed to be a man. Okay, well, that's not where we get truth or God's truth. Yeah, you can do all these things, be those things, and you can go where those people go. And you can go into hell and make of it what you will. You probably, like, there is no light. The whole life force that you appreciate in the world doesn't exist there. So unless you or anyone in there can somehow be a source of life, light, same kind of thing, warmth, expect those things to not be there. Anyway, die to yourself. Make a list of all the things that you like that God doesn't like. Make all the list of things that you want that God doesn't want for you. Make all the list of things where you feel so convinced that this is who you are or what you are, and then compare it to the God of the Bible. And God will be the judge if you're doing this honestly or if you're lying to yourself. Learn who the God is of the Bible. Make it a priority to find delight in knowing Him. Make it a priority. Like, when it comes to listening to music, and this is a section where I don't want to boast too much, where I would actually don't want to say me or I, but whatever, we're going with it. I don't really see any sense in listening to any music other than worship music. What are most songs about? Most songs are all about bragging about how capable you are. I bought all this stuff. I did all these things. Me, I. That's typical secular music. Or being consumed with the things of the world, like singing about how many friends you have. If it doesn't have anything to do with God, I don't care. You can care about it, but I don't. When it comes to what do I allow, as far as music is concerned, in my mind, through my ears, through my eyes, I really don't see any reason for it to be anything other than worship music. Yeah, I venture off and I'll listen to a cool song here and there. And, as long as the music is not something God hates, basically it's something you'd be okay listening to with your mom present, okay, fine. But, yeah, ask yourself, why do man, there's so many Christians that listen to garbage on television. They watch garbage. Okay, I'll tell you right now, horror films, God hates that stuff. And God hates that you like it. So, ask yourself, do you delight in the same thing that God delights in? Do you hate the same thing God hates? Because when you start aligning yourself with what He delights in, and you start hating the things that He hates, you'll start seeing new desires. The things you desire will change. He doesn't just give you what you desire. The desires themselves will be different. The desire itself will be rooted to Him, His character, His personality. All right, let's close out here. A few questions to leave you with. Which insight or gift from God have you been tempted to not use? Where do you sense God is pruning you? What kind of crap in your life that we so think is so important that really isn't important at all, that God is cutting out? How does pride show up in your walk when you are able to remember and rehearse and repeat scriptures, and people are so impressed with your ability to quote the Bible Do you become impressed with yourself? Does that cause you to become proud? It's normal. It's natural. Happens to me still. What step can you take this week to act on what God has already shown you? Lord, thank you for entrusting us with gifts and insights. Help us use them faithfully. Keep us humble. Prune us for your glory. Give us hearts that delight in you above all else.